The first comic book. When people talk about the first DC comic, they are usually referring to Action Comics issue 1. Released in 1938 by what would later become DC Comics, this issue created the superhero genre as we know it. Before this, comics were mostly about detectives, westerns, or pulp-style adventures. But this one changed everything overnight. At the center of Action Comics is the very first appearance of Superman, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. He wasn't the polished hero we know today, he couldn't fly yet, but he could leap incredible distances, stop cars, and overpower criminals with ease. More importantly, he represented something new at the time, a larger-than-life hero who fights for justice in a modern world. And that idea instantly connected with readers. What made this comic so groundbreaking is how bold it felt. Superman wasn't just solving crimes, he was going after corrupt businessmen, abusive figures, and social injustice. It gave readers a sense that someone powerful could actually stand up for the little guy, and this mix of fantasy and real-world problems made the character feel both exciting and meaningful, which is something that hadn't really been done before in comics. In a way, Action Comics 1 launched an entire industry. After its success, publishers rushed to create their own superheroes, leading to the golden age of comics. Without it, you probably don't get Batman, Wonder Woman, or even Marvel's rise later on. This was DC's first major comic, yes, and it was also the moment superheroes were truly born. DC's first crossover. The real first crossover storyline is Zatanna's Search in 1964, a story that ran across multiple titles like Detective Comics, The Atom, and Justice League of America. At the time, this was a big shift. Stories were usually contained within one series, but this arc required readers to follow the narrative across different books. It marked one of the earliest examples of a shared universe being used in a connected, ongoing way. The story introduces Zatanna, who would go on to become one of DC's most iconic magical heroes. She travels across the DC universe, asking different heroes for help in finding her missing father, Zatara, a Golden Age magician who actually first appeared way back in Action Comics 1. Right away, the story connects DC's past and present, making the universe feel bigger and more alive. And instead of telling one complete story in a single issue, Zatanna's Search spreads its chapters across different series, with each hero contributing a piece of the puzzle. Characters like the Atom and the Justice League help Zatanna in different ways, and each issue pushes the story forward. This jump between titles format is what makes it so important and revolutionary. It's one of the first times comics truly felt interconnected on a structural level. Written by Gardner Fox, one of the key figures of DC's Silver Age, this storyline helped define how crossovers could work. It showed that readers were willing to follow a story across multiple books, paving the way for bigger and more complex events later on. Just like Marvel's early crossovers, this was DC testing the waters, and it laid the groundwork for every major crossover that came after. The first major event. It is Crisis on Infinite Earths, a massive storyline that changed the entire DC universe forever. Before this, DC had multiple parallel Earths with different versions of characters, which made continuity messy and confusing. Crisis was created to fix that, but instead of a simple cleanup, it turned into one of the most ambitious and impactful comic events ever made. The story revolves around a cosmic threat known as the Anti-Monitor, who begins destroying universes one by one. Heroes and villains from across different Earths are forced to come together to stop him, creating a truly massive scale never seen before. This was a fight for existence itself, with entire realities being wiped out. It was written by Marv Wolfman and illustrated by George Perez, and it became the blueprint for every major comic event that followed. It proved that events could have real stakes, lasting impact, and massive scope all at once. Even today, most crossover events, whether in DC or Marvel, owe something to what Crisis started, and it had permanent consequences, like major characters died, including versions of iconic heroes, and the multiverse itself was erased and replaced with a single, unified timeline. This event reshaped DC completely, and after Crisis, characters were rebooted, origins were rewritten, and the entire continuity was simplified for new readers. The first female superhero. It is none other than Wonder Woman, who debuted in All-Star Comics issue 8. Created by William Moulton Marston, she quickly became one of the most important characters in comic book history. At a time when most heroes were male, Wonder Woman stood out immediately as a powerful central figure, not a side character. Diana comes from Themyscira, an island of Amazons, and enters the outside world after meeting Steve Trevor. Unlike other heroes whose powers came from accidents or science, her abilities are rooted in mythology. She combines strength, speed, and combat skill with iconic tools like the Lasso of Truth, making her feel unique compared to other heroes of the time. Wonder Woman wasn't just DC's first female superhero, she was one of the first in all of comics to lead her own stories while standing alongside icons like Superman and Batman. She represented strength, independence, and compassion, challenging the norms of the era and expanding what a superhero could be. Her introduction opened the door for future female heroes across DC and beyond. More importantly, she proved that superhero stories didn't have to revolve only around male characters. Decades later, Wonder Woman remains one of DC's most iconic and influential heroes, showing just how important that first step really was. The first villain. The first true supervillain in DC Comics is the Ultra Humanite, who debuted in Action Comics issue 13. Appearing just a year after Superman's debut, Ultra Humanite was one of the earliest examples of a recurring, intelligent villain specifically created to challenge a superhero. Before him, most threats were just criminals, but this was something different. Unlike later villains who relied on brute force, Ultra Humanite was all about intellect. He was a criminal mastermind with a brilliant mind and a physically weak body, often operating from the shadows while manipulating events. Over time, the character became even more bizarre, eventually transferring his brain into different bodies, including famously a giant albino gorilla. What made Ultra Humanite important is that he wasn't just a one-off enemy. Like I said, he was a recurring threat to Superman. This helped establish the idea that heroes need consistent rivals, not just random villains in each issue. It created a dynamic where readers could follow an ongoing conflict between hero and villain. Ultra Humanite set the blueprint for many villains that came after him, especially genius-type antagonists like Lex Luthor. He introduced the idea that the real danger doesn't always come from strength, but from intelligence and planning. As DC's first supervillain, he kind of helped define what a comic book villain could be, and that influence is still felt today. The first team. It is Justice Society of America, debuting in All-Star Comics issue 3. Long before the Justice League or Avengers, this was the very first time multiple heroes came together in one story. It marked a huge shift from solo adventures to shared teamwork, helping define how superhero teams would work moving forward. The Justice Society brought together some of DC's earliest heroes, including Jay Garrick as The Flash, Alan Scott as Green Lantern, Hawkman, Dr. Fate, and more. Instead of focusing on one just main character, the story gave each member a moment to shine, with the team often gathering to share cases and then splitting up to handle different missions. It created a sense that these heroes existed in the same world. What made the GSA special is how it structured its storytelling. Each issue felt like multiple mini-adventures connected by a central meeting, rather than one continuous plot. This format allowed DC to showcase several characters at once while still keeping their individual identities strong. It also encouraged readers to follow different heroes across multiple comics. The Justice Society of America didn't just create the idea of a superhero team, but it introduced the concept of a shared universe where heroes interact more often. Without it, you probably don't get the Justice League, the Avengers, or any modern team dynamics. It was the blueprint for everything that came after. The first major death. The first truly impactful death in DC Comics is the death of Barry Allen, aka The Flash, which happens in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 8. This death wasn't just shocking, it was permanent for a long time and tied directly to saving the entire universe. During the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the villain known as the Anti-Manager creates a weapon capable of destroying what's left of the multiverse. Barry Allen breaks free from captivity and runs faster than he ever has before, cycling the weapon and generating enough energy to destroy it. As he pushes beyond his limits, his body begins to break apart, and he ultimately sacrifices himself to stop the threat. Barry Allen wasn't just any hero, he was the Flash for an entire generation and a core member of the DC universe. Watching him die while saving everyone gave the story real emotional weight. This wasn't a temporary loss or a fake out. For years, Barry stayed dead, and his legacy was carried on by others like Wally West, making the sacrifice feel meaningful and lasting. This death set the standard for stakes in DC Comics. It showed that even the biggest heroes could fall and that those deaths could reshape the universe. It also reinforced the idea of legacy, heroes passing the mantle instead of always coming back. Just like Gwen Stacy's death in Marvel, this was the moment DC proved that actions have consequences and that not every hero makes it out alive. The first billion-dollar movie. It is The Dark Knight, released in 2008 and directed by none other than Christopher Nolan. This movie was a global phenomenon. It proved that comic book films could be taken seriously as cinema, not just entertainment. At the center of the film is Joker, played by Heath Ledger. His performance redefined what a comic book villain could be: unpredictable, chaotic, and deeply unsettling. The dynamic between Joker and Batman is what drives the entire movie, turning it into more than just a hero versus villain story. What made The Dark Knight stand out is how grounded and realistic it felt. Instead of focusing only on action, it explored themes like morality, chaos, and the cost of being a hero. hero. Gotham felt like a real city, and the stakes felt personal and global at the same time. This helped the movie appeal to a much wider audience beyond comic fans. Crossing $1 billion wasn't just a financial milestone, it changed how studios viewed superhero films. After The Dark Knight, darker, more serious comic adaptations became more common, and expectations for storytelling increased. It set a new standard for quality and proved that DC characters could dominate the box office at the highest level. The first live-action movie. It is Superman and the Mole Man. Released in 1951, long before the big-budget superhero films we know today, this was a small, black-and-white movie that brought DC's most iconic hero to the screen. It stars George Reeves as Superman and was actually designed to help launch the later TV show Adventures of Superman. So while it feels simple now, it was a huge step at the time. In this film, Superman investigates a mysterious oil-drilling project that accidentally uncovers a group of underground beings called the Mole Man. Instead of turning the story into pure action, the movie focuses more on misunderstanding and fear, showing how humans react to something unfamiliar. Superman acts more like a protector and mediator than just a fighter, and the movie was made with very limited resources, their simple effects, basic sets, and straightforward storytelling. But despite that, it captured the core idea of Superman as a symbol of hope and justice. It didn't rely on spectacle, instead it leaned into message and character, which helped it stand out in its own way. Even though it's far from modern superhero films, Superman and the Mole Man was the starting point for DC in live-action cinema. It proved that these characters could exist outside of comics and connect with audiences on screen. Without it, you probably don't get the evolution that leads to Superman in 1978 and Batman in 1989, and eventually the entire DC film universe. The first animated movie. It's Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, released in 1993. It was based on the critically acclaimed Batman the Animated Series, and it is widely considered the first time DC brought one of its animated stories to the big screen. At a time when animated superhero films weren't really a thing, this movie quietly set a new standard. The film follows Batman as he faces a mysterious vigilante known as the Phantasm, who is targeting Gotham's criminals. At the time, the story dives into Bruce Wayne's past, especially his relationship with Andrea, showing what he had to sacrifice to become Batman. This gave the movie a much deeper emotional core than most superhero stories at the time. Unlike typical cartoons, Mask of the Phantasm was designed with cinematic storytelling in mind. Strong lighting, dramatic pacing, and a serious tone. It didn't feel like an extended TV episode. It genuinely felt like a real movie. Even though it didn't perform well at the box office initially, it gained massive recognition over time. Today, the movie is often considered one of the best Batman films ever made, animated or live action. It proved that animated superhero stories could be mature, emotional, and taken seriously. And it also paved the way for DC's strong reputation in animation and, of course, the DC animated universe. The first black superhero. It is Black Lightning, who debuted in Black Lightning issue 1. Created by Tony, Isabella, and Trevor Von Ehren, Jefferson Pierce wasn't just introduced as a hero, he was given a full identity, background, and purpose from the start. Unlike many earlier characters, his story was deeply rooted in real-world issues. Jefferson Pierce is a teacher who returns to his neighborhood to fight crime and help his community. His powers, being electric-based abilities, make him visually cool, but what really defines him is his motivation to protect and uplift the people around him. Black Lightning was groundbreaking because he wasn't a side character or a background figure. It was the main focus of his own series. At a time when representation was still limited in comics, this was a major step forward. It showed that DC could create heroes from different backgrounds and give them meaningful central roles. Black Lightning opened the door for many other black superheroes in DC. More importantly, he proved that superhero stories could reflect real communities and real struggles while still being exciting and powerful. It wasn't just DC's first black superhero. It was the start of something much bigger. The first live-action show. It's Adventures of Superman, which premiered in 1952, starring George Reeves as Superman. The show brought DC's most iconic hero directly into people's homes at a time when television itself was still growing. It was one of the earliest examples of a superhero series on TV, making it a major milestone for both DC and the genre as a whole. The show follows Superman as he balances his life as Clark Kent, a reporter at the Daily Planet, with his role as a hero protecting Metropolis. Episodes were usually self-contained, featuring on crimes, investigations, and Superman stepping in to save the day. It kept things simple and accessible, which made it easy for audiences to follow week after week. Like most shows from the 1950s, Adventures of Superman had limited special effects and relied heavily on practical tricks and storytelling just like the movie before. But what it lacked in spectacle, it made up for with charm and character, and George Reeves' portrayal of Superman became iconic, shaping how audiences viewed the character for years. This show was the first time a DC superhero was on television, not just in comics or theaters. It helped solidify Superman as an actual icon and paved the way for every DC show that followed, from Batman in the 60s to the modern Arrowverse. It was the first real step in turning DC heroes into mainstream entertainment beyond the page. The first animated show. It's The New Adventures of Superman, released in 1966. Produced by Filmation, this series brought Superman into animation for the first time in a full TV format. Just like Marvel's early animated attempts, it was simple, limited, and very much a product of its time. But it marked a huge step in expanding DC beyond comics and live action. The show focuses on Superman, once again proving he was DC's go-to character for breaking new ground. Episodes follow him dealing with various threats, from criminals to more fantastical dangers, while maintaining that classic heroic tone. It kept things straightforward, making it easy for younger audiences to follow. Like many cartoons of the 1960s, the animation was very limited, reused frames, simple movements, and minimal detail. But it still captured the essence of Superman. The voice acting and storytelling carried most of the experience, giving it a charm that fans still appreciate today. This was the starting point of DC's long history in animated storytelling, which would eventually become one of its strongest areas. The first video game. It is Superman, released in 1979 for the Atari 2600. This wasn't just DC's first game, it's actually considered one of the first superhero video games ever made, period. Long before modern, open-world games, this was the very beginning of bringing comic book heroes into interactive form. In the game, you play as Superman, flying around the city to capture Lex Luthor and his henchmen. Along the way, you have to repair a destroyed bridge, avoid kryptonite, which weakens you, and use a form of X-ray vision to locate enemies. Yes, it sounds basic now, but at the time, these mechanics were actually pretty creative. Like most Atari 2600 games, the visuals were extremely simple. You've got blocky graphics and very minimal animation. But despite the limitations, the game still managed to include multiple objectives and even a loose sense of story. It showed that superhero powers and gameplay could actually work together, even on very early hardware.